Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that, I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, good to have you back on this week. Thank you for making time.
Good afternoon.
Well, let's start with Wall Street, where the post-Christmas rally took a breather with a lot of focus on the spread of the Omicron variant. Shares of Pfizer and Moderna, interestingly, were both down around 2%. The Dow, though, was up for a fifth straight session. What's the story in the markets, and what should investors be watching right now?
Yes, if you look at the overall this market trend, it's kind of a bit of a soft week in terms of economic releases, and therefore we saw somewhat of a weakness that happening in say Nasdaq. In regard to the Santa Claus rally, it seems to be taking a bit of a breather for the time being. If you look at the overall this year, S&P 500 is up more than 28%, and Nasdaq is up about 23%. Dow Jones was up about 19%. So we have not many days left for trading, and we are seeing quite a bit of a breather for the time being. As you said, there's a bit of a concern about the Omicron variant, but market seems to be fairly resilient in the sense that Dow have showed fifth straight days of rising trend, while the Nasdaq is the index that showed 0.6% drop. If you look at the global COVID-19 cases, it is hitting record high level continuously on a daily basis. And we're seeing many countries imposing restrictions, and there are several studies indicating that the new strain is highly contagious. But luckily, luckily that the cases of illness seems to be less severe per se. So that is affecting the market to be a bit of a light trading days, and that seems to be affecting globally. If you look at Chinese market, it did show quite a bit of decline, where Shanghai was down by 0.9% and Shenzhen component was down by 1.2%. This is all because of the concern about the country battling against the worst COVID-19 surges that we've seen in the 21 months. There's a possibility of closing down of factories or specific cities per se. The northern city of Shan showed 13 million residents are entering the 6 days of home confinement. So all that seems to be affecting overall global market overall. We have to watch out for how this plays out in the future.
Well, today in Korea, we saw the KOSPI fall back below 3,000 points. We discussed yesterday how a lot of retail selling had to do with capital gains tax, and today we have the ex-dividend date. A lot of individuals buying and institutions selling. Shares of Samsung back now below 80,000 won. Tell us about the domestic market.
Right. As we saw retail investors selling over 3 trillion won worth of Korean equities yesterday, today, right after the dividend payout and also the tax-related issues disappeared, we saw local investors buying 1.8 trillion won worth of KOSPI, and also for KOSDAQ, 1.7 trillion won worth of equities. So if you add those two, that's over 3.5 trillion. So whatever they sold yesterday, they rebought today. That's kind of very unfortunate that such a short-term related trading is happening due to these issues. We see some policies changing towards local investors using the equity market as a bit of a long-term investment rather than this type of trading-oriented short-term investment. If you look at the overall KOSPI, it was down by 0.89%. KOSDAQ was up slightly by 0.06%, but this is after the stock dividend payout corrections. So if we look at it in that way, we did see overall market rising. As you know, dividend payout for last year probably around 2% plus of the overall market. So KOSPI should have declined by more than 50 points, but it declined by only 27 points. That means actually it net rose because of the dividend payout per se. All in all, we need to look into the futures where what's happening to the economic front. Everybody is concerned about the producer inflations. The PPI numbers are coming in at 13 years high. People might be concerned about how that will affect the overall margin for the exporters, the manufacturing industries, because Korea is heavily dependent on export. And in terms of domestic consumption related wise, we continue to be burdened by the rising interest rate environment as well as high level of the consumer debt. Overall, fundamental seems to be quite intact in terms of the valuation of the Korean companies, but we do need to watch out for how the margin plays out in year 2022.
Right, and great point about the net asset value after the dividend today. And to switch gears for a minute, we see oil prices continuing to bounce back from their recent lows, and the main benchmarks like West Texas and Brent at their highest in a month. Gold inching back up too. What's behind these moves and your outlook for these two?
Yes. The commodity price seems to be quite resilient as we go near the year end. If you look at the oil price, it's slightly up, $76 per barrel WTI index-wise. Brent oil is also up about 0.45% to $79. In terms of the gold, we did see quite strong move, and it did go up to as high as 1800 plus. But we do see today that it is showing some short-term corrections of about 0.46%. Obviously, the oil as well as the gold all is affected by the inflation pressure that we're seeing in the global market. And as far as a particularly concern about the oil prices, the energy sector related is highly affected by what's happening to the fourth industrial revolutions, where we need a lot more energies, electricities, in order to carry on these advancement. But on top of that, we did see uncertainty about the supply side. As you know, that Russia and Ukraine, as well as U.S., are all involved in terms of how there's possibility of Russia attacking Ukraine. That is a key issue. If that happens, then the supply side becomes quite a bit of a problem, and therefore that results into highly speculative price rise for the oil as well as natural gas. That seems to be happening for the time being. We do know that these parties will be having conferences, meetings in January 10th of next year. Until then, the uncertainty will remain quite high as Russia cut down the supply to Europe in regards to natural gas, all involving these political issues about Ukraine. And the U.S. is trying to help the Europe by sending the LNG shipment quite aggressively. And obviously, U.S. will be involved in terms of how they will supply the energy for Europe continent. So all in all, we need to watch out how the political arena plays out in order for these prices changes that we've seen so far. As oil have recovered from $60 around level as a low and now to above $78 per barrel as high as on Wednesday, we rethink that supply and demand picture is in such that price should be remaining at where it is for the time being.
Well, speaking of uncertainty, Mr. Yu, according to the Bank of Korea, business sentiment is up slightly this month, despite the service sector taking another hit from social distancing, but the outlook for next month is less certain. What do you make of these numbers?
Yes, once again, there's quite a bit of divergences happening. It seems to be the case for most of the countries with a highly manufacturing-based economy. If you look at the Korea Business Confidence Index, the business conditions for the manufacturing sector rose to 95 in December after 3 consecutive months of steady at 90 plus. This is the highest level that we've seen in the past 5 months. And also, if you look at a country like Taiwan, we saw market rising to record high level. Obviously, they're heavily focused on manufacturing of semiconductor businesses. So we are seeing upon the sports industry revolution that high demand is happening regarding the semiconductor and anything related to electric cars and etc. So all that is affecting positively for the manufacturing industries. However, as far as Korea is concerned, the retail side seems to be quite uncertain. As you know, we are seeing high-level consumer debt as a percentage of GDP right now. Households were much less optimistic about the current state of economy as a lot of the COVID-19 cases spurring out right now. We are continuing to see highest level of infections that's happening. And we did see some shutdowns happening. Right now, there's no gathering after 9 p.m. So all that means is a continuation of uncertainty about the domestic consumption-related industries, and that is definitely affecting the sentiment of the Korean consumers. So there's divergences between manufacturing sector versus the consumer sector. So we need to watch out how that plays out. Hopefully by the beginning of next year sometime, the medicines to control these infections can be supplied well, and the vaccine becomes effective. If that happens, then economic growth rate recovery should be quite certain. But for the time being, we're still concerned about these high cases of COVID-19 cases.
All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for this week. We at Arirang News would like to thank you for all the insights you've shared with us this year. We hope you have a happy new year, and we'll see you in 2022.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year.